right, guys, we're going to begin starting here in about 1 minute. Welcome to On the Record with Alexander. Make sure you share this, please. Invite others so they can be able to watch this forum. We thank everybody for being here this evening. Beautiful day down here in Pensacola, Florida, Escambia County. All right. David, how are we doing today, sir?
Doing great, better than I deserve.
Amen. Amen.
Better than I deserve. And I'm just excited to be here. And certainly it's a great day. I had a great day out in the community. And I'm just excited about the opportunity to serve my community in a bigger way.
Good, good. Well, I know we're excited as well. All right, so we don't want to waste anybody's time. We thank you guys for taking time out of your busy schedule. Once again, please share this event. Share this event. Dave is going to be addressing some questions that was in the article, and we want to make sure that everybody gets the information. So without further ado, let's get started. So once again, welcome to On the Record with Alexander. My name is Steve Wilmer with Steve Speaks, and I've had the pleasure of knowing David. You may not realize this, almost 30 years.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Don't start telling no police stories.
No, I promise I won't.
If he sees you on the street, he tells you a police story about me, do not believe it, right? But had the pleasure of knowing David for almost 30 years from the Pensacola Police Department. He was my field training officer, my sergeant, going on to be a mentor of mine, a pastor, a confidant, if you will. So I'm excited to be here with you today.
It's a pleasure to have you here with me as well, Stephen. And it's always good to be Facebook Live with Escambia County.
All right. So let's jump right into it. So a couple of weeks ago, back mid-August, WEAR, they had a forum about police reform. Obviously, they were talking to you. They were talking to Chip as well. Mm-hmm. And then they put on the forum just basically they asked you guys some questions. And you kind of it was almost like taking a test,
yeah.
Right? Right. You know, I agree. I somewhat agree. I disagree.
Right.
And a lot of questions came from that, and some people had some questions. And so this is an opportunity to go on the record with you to allow you to be able to, expound on some of those. So how about you kind of open up, address the voters of Escambia County, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks again for being with me today, and certainly those that are tuning in. I appreciate you taking the time in your busy schedules to be with us. I just want to assure you that I really want to restore the trust and confidence of citizens in the sheriff's office. I know that the challenges that citizens face, I know that the challenges that law enforcement face, and I just believe that my goal of serving, protecting all citizens in Escambia County is really what we need right now. And my experience and dedication and my passion to community policing is going to take the Escambia County Sheriff's Department to the next level. The current administration has had years to address problems and make changes in the Sheriff's Department with no resolve. And I think the citizens at this point in time in their lives, they really deserve to have true leadership, trusted leadership, leadership that leads with integrity. And so my opponent is running on experience. But however, his experience has not been effective in assisting the Sheriff Department in lowering the crime rates throughout our county. It's not assisted in leadership capacity of dealing with the high rate of turnover, being able to recruit and retain officers. It has not assisted in the increased usage of the civil citation, which right now the Sheriff's Department has approximately 30% usage, whereas the city of Pensacola has approximately 60% usage. And just a few days ago, my opponent claimed to be the pioneer of the civil citation program. And that was definitely a misleading statement to make publicly, because before he even became the chief of police, he said that he brought it in as chief of police. But in the 90s, we have officers that have worked the civil citation program. And it just goes to show you that the civil citation program has been around a long time, and that it's just a matter of leadership recognizing the value of it and working hard to keep it consistently a presence in our communities. And so I want to make sure that today we address some things, because I just felt like in a couple of areas in this survey that it left voters kind of questioning what I really meant, or am I just way out there? And I want the voters to have the benefit of all of my answers and not just what they are able to deduct from a newspaper article or a TV blast. So that's what this is all about. Is just going on the record.
Going on the record.
My position, because there's a lot of threatening tactics used to create fear in voters, to make them think, well, I don't want this and I don't want that. Ask David Alexander. We come on every other Monday. Ask Alexander, because we want to make sure we make ourselves available during this campaign, and even as a sheriff, to the public, so that we can hear from them and we can be responsive.
Well, that's exactly why we want to be able to have this. And I want to mention something before we get to the very first question. You said that the challenges that the voters of Escambia County have, the citizens of Escambia County has, and that's because of your 30 plus years in law enforcement, being the chief of police at the city as well.
That's right. And have an extensive history of working with people in communities, as well as working with other agencies, federal, state, local, non-government, government, you name it. If you want to work with the police and solve a community problem, I'm all for it. We're gonna put our best foot forward, and 99% of the time, we are effective in getting the job done.
There we go. Well, that's what we want, somebody who can get the job done. So,
Absolutely.
Let's jump right into it. I want to go to the very first question. I know it's on a lot of people's minds out there. Again, where you had to say agree, disagree, somewhat agree. And the number one question was about defunding the police department. Now, we hear a lot of that on the television. It's all over the news. People are screaming, defund, the police.
Yes.
And I think really a lot of people don't understand what that means. And so your answer was you somewhat agree. Somewhat disagree. I apologize. You somewhat disagree. So kind of just explain to the viewers, the people that's watching, what does that really mean?
Well, first of all, the term defund has been used to really divide our community. Now, you alluded to that earlier. So a person said, what's your position on defunding police? Well, first of all, when you say what's my position on defunding, I've heard so many definitions of it. So it needs to be qualified when you ask that question. But and when you hear people qualified, you can say, well, yeah, I agree with you, or no, I disagree with you. So that's why I said I somewhat disagree, because it depends on what angle you're coming from.
So let me just address this right now, because when a lot of people say defund the police, that means getting rid of the police.
Yeah.
So are you in favor of getting rid of the police?
Absolutely not.
All right, so he is not in favor of getting rid of the police. Okay, so we understand that. So we get that off the table. All right.
And the other thing to go along with that is
right.
that I have been out in every area of Escambia County, and yet have I run into anybody
that wants to get
rid of police.
Okay,
If anything, they want better police services in their neighborhood.
There we go. All right.
And that doesn't matter what neighborhood you go into. We've heard that overwhelmingly. We want fair and impartial treatment from the police. We want our neighborhood protected too.
All right.
So when it comes down to now, these answers I'm giving to you were also submitted in with my survey. Okay. So I do believe that we should consider shifting duties, because a lot of times there are duties that law enforcement inherently have that are not really related to their job, but they're more related to other entities, whether it's social, government, non-government, and they get paid to do that. So if you're talking about taking away those duties and shifting them to the right people, I'm all for that. And especially if you have received money from state or local government that goes along with doing those duties, then shift the duties to the appropriate entities and shift the money that goes with them. But now, I've been in the chief of police position, I've been in an assistant chief, I've been in a captain's position. You don't want to take away the money that's dedicated to supplying officers on the street to police your neighborhoods. So that's why I say I would consider shifting if there are funds that have been given to us that really some other entity should be getting those funds. But no, I don't want you taking money out of my budget to take away my cars, to take away my deputies, to take away their equipment, Because when you call 911, I want you to know for sure two things are going to happen. That number one, we're going to respond, and number two, we're going to restore the peace and take care of business.
All right.
And so I don't want anything, especially money, to be the reason why we can't do that. If anything, I'm going to ask for more money to make sure we can get the job done. So that defunding question, we'll talk about shifting duties, but we're not talking about taking away money. As I talk to many voters, like I say, I do not support dismantling the police department through defunding. I believe that it is my position as a sheriff to serve and protect everyone. And I want to assure them today that their safety is my number one priority.
Good. All right. So now we got the commentary on somewhat disagree.
Yes.
So we understand what that means.
Absolutely.
Basically, shifting funds to where they should go.
Right.
I love your two things, right?
Yes.
Number one, that we're going to be able to respond
Yes.
and be able to restore order and peace.
Yes.
Amen.
That's what you want from the police.
That's what I want from the police. That's right. I want you to come and I want you to restore some order when you get there.
Law and order. I'm a law and order man.
All right. Let's jump into question number 2. And it was about implement bias training. And so when I saw this, I'm like, okay, bias training, I'm not really sure. But you said you agree with that. So kind of talk to us about that and why is that? What is bias training and explain it, and why do you agree?
Well, bias training really, it gets a little deeper into the concept and the truths that we all come into, not only law enforcement, we all come into this world and we develop some biases that might be open and obvious to see, but there's some that just implicit and they're not readily known as a bias. Sometimes the way we're told how to do our job creates a bias against people, places, and things. So it's just like a neighborhood. You can say, a lot of people say, well, I wouldn't dare go on the west side of town because there's nothing but crime and disruption there. So that's a bias that you could actually have built into you against the west side of town, not knowing that there's some nice neighborhoods, some absolutely fabulous neighborhoods on the west side of town. And that even on the east side of town, there are some areas of town that you would have to use extra caution because there's some dangers that exist. So dealing with bias is something that we come to know today in modern policing, that it can be implicit, it could be explicit.
Okay.
But what you have to do nowadays is train. So I agree that training should be included, but it should be included as a part of the police academy training and certification. In other words, before an officer even come into your department, they should have been trained and tested on bias training. And then once they get into the department, this training should be positively reinforced when they go to the field training program. And then your recertification training, it just makes sure you're up to snuff on what you are expected to do. And then training is no good if officers and personnel are not held accountable for doing what they're trained to do.
Okay.
So that's why I agree that, implementing bias-based training is important, but it also needs to be from the very beginning. And before you even get to step into law enforcement, you need to know how important this training is.
And so as sheriff, that's something that you would definitely reinforce.
Oh yes, I would love, I'm going to sit down and talk with the police academy because I believe a lot of times they desire feedback from your local law enforcement agencies to know what the needs are coming from the agencies, and that some things that they may want, the leaders may want emphasized even more, such as inclusion and how to get into diverse neighborhoods. We got tons of training that could be implemented on that regard, and they come in with a greater respect for what a guardian of community looks like rather than what a warrior looks like. We're not going into war zones. We're going into neighborhoods and communities where people are expecting to be policed and be policed with respect.
I love that you keep talking about, community.
Yes.
It takes everybody, to be able to run a community and
Right.
to be able to help in the community. So
And that's something Robert Peel said, who's considered to be the father of modern policing, is that the community are the police and the police are the community. And that's why I believe we should be able to recruit out of our community, and we should be able to see young men and women grow up in our community and become police officers. and respected police officers.
All right. So I'll tell you what, that really takes us to number 3, what also has to do with training. It says subject law enforcement officers to longer training. And on this one, it says disagree. So you know you have to explain that one.
Right. Because my understanding of the question was like giving them longer hours. Now let me tell you something. If I spend 8 hours 2 or 3 times a week in training, how much police work am I doing? Okay? Training's got to be relevant to what the needs are. And that's why it's often important to do a needs assessment regarding your training, because training is an integral part of not only improving performance and making sure performance is relative to the community's need, but it's also a part of your personal growth and development of your officers. You grow leaders in your department. You grow leaders who will take your place in your department. So you want to make sure the hours, you're a good steward of the time that you spend in training, but you also want to make sure when they're in training, they understand that training is important. It's not a time off the job to just kind of lollygag and relax. No, you're there to learn, and you're going to be held accountable for what you learn, because what you learn is supposed to help you serve and protect your community.
So would it be fair to say maybe not longer hours, but maybe proper training?
Proper training, and training should be ongoing. Training is a part of leadership. Training is a part of learning. When you stop learning, you stop leading. You know, leaders that tap out is because they stop learning. That's called the 5th discipline. And this is something that when I understood the concept back at the FBI Academy, I found out, man, you know, if you want to stay relevant, if you want to sew yourself into a company where they can't get rid of you, keep learning new things. Keep learning new ways to do things. Understand and remember how things used to be. Understand the problems, because sometimes when technology breaks down, you got to go back to the old way of doing things. And if you never understood that, then there's no need for you, because they need somebody who can either get us back up to where we were or hold steady until we get the help we need. So learning is a continuous process. It's ongoing, and it should remain relevant, and it's also a part of the career path. The more you train and develop the most precious asset in your department, which is your men and women and your support staff, then you continuously grow your organization into being a professional run organization. And I believe that's what the public wants now, is a professionally run sheriff department that run with integrity from the top all the way down to the bottom.
Man, you told me once, you know, if you're willing to learn, no one can stop you. And if you're not willing to learn, no one can help you.
No one can help you.
Right.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Now, you've mentioned a couple of times, you talked about leadership. Do you think it's important to have that strong leadership? Obviously not as the sheriff, just as the sheriff, but what about the majors and the captains and lieutenants and sergeants and things like that?
When I talk about investing training into the most valuable asset in the department, that's from the rank where I am all the way down. I want those who serve under me in an administrative position to be trained that if something happened and I can't be there, it's not going to stop anything. They know what the roadmap says. They know how we're going to get there. They know what we need to do to get it. And so what I found out as a field training officer is that when I trained my incoming officers to be field training officers, I actually set myself up for the next level. And when I did that as a sergeant, I trained them to become sergeants.
Right.
And I did it as a lieutenant. I trained my sergeants to become lieutenants. And I did it as a captain. And I went and so on and so on. So when you get an administrative level, I want them to see a career path from the entry-level position all the way up to my office. And that if they're willing to apply themselves and continually learn, then there's a good possibility they can make it. Maybe not at my department, but you know what? I found out that when you said you was a police officer at LAPD and you had accolades of accomplishments and achievement, people all over the country were willing to hire you on and put you in leadership position because of the recognition that went with being affiliated with an organization that had that kind of level of training. I want the sheriff department to be that. I want the sheriff department to be that, man, I could take a guy that was a sergeant there and I can put him over this whole operations here. He can head this security department. because they've been prepared to step up to the next level. And I was a very competitive athlete. And I believe that when I prepared to play at the next level up, the people that were my peer level were no competition to me. Because I played the next level up. So that's the way I like to do in law enforcement.
There you go, playing to the next level up.
Playing the next level up.
I love it. I love it. Well, let's keep it moving. On the record here with Alexander. Again, thank you guys for being here. I hope you're sharing this right now. Please share this on your Facebook page. The next question said, make law enforcement disciplinary records public. And again, it's somewhat disagree. So please explain that to the viewers.
Well, and that was one of the, when you looked at the survey in the paper, that was one of them. I said, oh man, this kind of gives people a real bad, I understand the importance of public records. And certainly, when you run an organization based on integrity, you want to make sure it's transparent and that things that should be made public are made public. We're not getting that right now. You know what they want you to know, and good, bad, or indifference, it creates a lot of skepticism in the minds of citizens. But I believe that when I said somewhat disagree, there are information a lot of times that are in disciplinary files that include details of other statutory protected information.
Okay.
It could include medical records or medical information on an employee. And so just take the whole file and throw it out there. It's not a great idea. There are some things that are covered by law that you cannot give out. So when I'm dealing with a non-law enforcement entity, I'm trying to read into what are they asking me. And if I'm not sure, I want to explain my answer. So I said I will always follow laws that govern public records. But however, discretion is necessary when you're releasing certain information that could even put the lives of people in danger. I remember one case where a gentleman was trying to find out what the name of a CI was that did a control buy that allowed his house to get raided because he was a drug dealer. And he went through great lengths. He went through great lengths of filing complaints directly and indirectly related to that case. And had you just had this policy where all the records are just dumped out there and you let the public have it, the life of this person that actually gave the information that caused this drug house to be shut down could have been put in danger, and that person could have lost their life. So I believe that you just don't go out here and throw that out as a public policy, because guess what will happen? When you get elected, they're going to hold you to it. And when you start backpedaling on things that you said, they're going to make note of that too. Wow. And so that's why I felt like that question desired some qualification to it, because if you're telling me you're going to throw everything in a disciplinary file out there, I'm telling you, you're going to open up a can of worms that may cause ongoing investigation to be compromised. You could cause someone to lose their life. You could put someone's personal information that's protected by law out there for public display.
So obviously you're running for sheriff of Escambia County, and then talk about politicians. You just mentioned something. Sometimes politicians have a tendency to put something out there, to use your words. They put something out there, and then they start backtracking.
Right.
And then you mentioned earlier about running an organization, the sheriff's department, based on integrity.
Yes.
How important is that to you?
That's very important, because if the process isn't fair for the men and women that serve and protect and support staff in the sheriff department, then how can we realistically expect fair and impartial policing in the community? And I have people, matter of fact, today, I was up on the north end of town, and a gentleman expressed his displeasure from the fact that he's known people to call and ask for a deputy to show up. And the deputy made them feel like they wasted their time for calling, or everything is a civil matter and nothing they can do. But then when somebody gets killed or someone gets a serious crime comes out of that, then they're up there and they don't want to hear nothing you have to say. So again, how we approach responding should be uniform. It should be based on best practices. And it shouldn't come in with a whole lot of subjectivity. Yes, law enforcement officers have a lot of discretionary power to exercise. But training and developing officers into leaders and problem solvers is what we need to do at the sheriff department.
I think I've heard you say a couple of times professionalism over politics.
Over politics,
Right.
yes.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes you hear people say, well, that means you got to know somebody to get something done. And no, you pay tax dollars to fund this sheriff department.
I think Escambia County is pretty much tired of that, right? Where you got to
Yes.
know somebody to get something done.
I think a lot of folks are tired of that. And that's why I say it is time for a change.
Amen. All right. Let's keep it moving. We're still on the record with Alexander. Got a couple of more questions here. Require law enforcement officers to learn de-escalation tactics and enforce them, and then use them during protests if necessary. Now you're neutral on this. So again, explain to the voters of Escambia County
Well,
your answer.
this questionnaire was supposed to have been to bring to the candidates some concerns or demands that the group of protesters had.
Okay.
And so now on this question, my question was, is this the news journal's interpretation of what they said? Because if it's a peaceful protest, then we're not going to have these problems. We shouldn't have these problems. But then when there is a problem and officers are already trained in crisis intervention, which includes de-escalation. But it's like I explained also to citizens that there are some times when a problem is already out of control. And now de-escalating tactics is not going to be practical.
Right.
But what we want to make sure through training and development is that our officers are poised and that we understand the protocol for responding to crisis situation. And that when we can help de-escalate a situation, that's what we're going to do. I think they demonstrated the ability to do that just last week with the gentleman that took shots at the sheriff department.
Right.
They didn't go in with guns aimed and shoot at escort ladies. This guy was taken in. So it shows us we don't have to train them on that. They know how to do it. We just need to make sure everybody understands this is the way we want these issues, especially involving people with mental illness, to come out. And certainly we don't want to jump to the gun that because somebody opposes us, that we don't need to use these same de-escalation skills. So again, we want to make sure that this training is a part of an ongoing process and that officers are held accountable for what they've been trained that they need to do.
Got it. So sometimes the question may have been positioned as this or that, black or white,
Right.
Yes or no, and obviously,
Right. And that's a lot in law enforcement.
Yeah.
A lot of times they want a yes or no when it's not a yes or no.
Right.
Sometimes it's a yes and a no. Because once they lock you in a yes or no, then of course
that's that backtracking you were talking about.
Now they're gonna make you backtrack because they're gonna throw what you should have considered before you said yes.
I got it.
Or they're gonna throw what you should have considered before you said no. So that's why when you are neutral or you somewhat agree or somewhat disagree, it kind of gives you some room to qualify your answer.
Right. Just depending on the situation.
It depends on the situation.
All right. Well, moving on along. Still on the record. Got one more question for you. It says implement restrictions related to protests, and you said you disagree.
Okay, because I believe the idea was to they wanted to restrict the use of weapons or tactics in making arrests during a peaceful protest. But training and accountability is essential to upholding citizens' rights. We have a responsibility to uphold the rights, all of the rights of citizens. That's why your right to protest is fine. But when your right to protest is being used to create violence to destroy property, now you're breaking the law. So, and the same thing with the Second Amendment. I uphold the Second Amendment, but we want to make sure we're using gun sense and not moving from one extreme end to the other. You got to make sure you keep the public safe. And sometimes that means looking for ways to keep guns out of the hands of people that are not well enough to have a gun. So again, training should make things where we can uphold citizens' rights, But at the same time, if this is a peaceful protest, then we wouldn't need to use any type of force. And this particular concern in this survey came as a result of some of the complaints of excessive use of force during protests. But mind you, a lot of these concerns are not the concerns that came from local protesters. It's concerns that came from protesters outside of Pensacola.
We've seen
Okay,
that before.
so we haven't had rioting and destroying of buildings here. It's been peaceful protests here, and those protests have led to some very civil conversations. And we see articles in the news that proves that. So a lot of times when they're asking these questions, in the back of my mind, are you referring to what's happening on a national scene when I'm concerned about what's happening right here in Pensacola? My job as a sheriff is not to police these counties all outside of Escambia County. My primary concern is the safety, security, and services of the citizens of Escambia County. Those who visit here, those who come and work and play here, as well as those who live here. Their safety is my number one priority.
Citizens of Escambia County, your safety is the number one priority. So, David, I know you, again, almost 30 years. So I know you as a man of integrity, leadership, man of faith, and somebody who won't just say anything, to get what they want.
Right.
But there are a lot of people that's listening today, that's watching today, that don't know you. What would you say here maybe to the citizens of Escambia County?
Well, I have 32 years of law enforcement. I'm a law and order man. I was raised by God-fearing parents, and they taught us that we should treat people like we want to be treated. I was oldest of 5 siblings, and I found myself always being in a position as a guardian and a protector. And I was influenced by a lot of good, positive role models that were in law enforcement, that were black, white, and other races as well. And you know what? I just found myself gravitating to something that I had a compassion for. I have the compassion. I have the passion to do this job for Escambia County. I believe it's time for leadership with integrity for Escambia County Sheriff Department. I believe it's time for the Escambia County residents, the voters, the taxpayers to have a sheriff that they can trust as their leader. And I just want to say today, I'm that leader today. I come with no fancy words. I don't come around flashing medals and all kinds of decorative things. I come just as I am, a true, dedicated law enforcement officer that wants to render a service for you, the hard-discerned taxpayers of Escambia County. And I'm just saying on November the 3rd, I want you to consider me, David Alexander, as your next sheriff of Escambia County. I promise you, if there's something wrong, we'll fix it. And and if there's something go wrong and we've done it, I'm going to accept the responsibility. I promise I won't blame you for it. I'll be your sheriff. I'll be a dedicated servant leader that you pay your tax dollars for. But it takes your vote on November the 3rd to make that a reality.
On the record with Alexander, David Alexander, Escambia County Sheriff, leadership you can trust. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Steve.